Expanding on Rod's, I believe he's correct that if it is in the ground now, that at the time it's vacated, they can continue that use. They could use all of their bundle of rights that they have for that buried franchise utility. If there is existing public right-of-way next to it that someone who wanted to put in, say, a fiber optic cable, they would likely have to put it within the existing public right-of-way and not enter on this private property, what amounts to private property, subject to Idaho Code 50-311, which lays out what rights are retained. So I don't believe you'd be able to put a new franchise utility in a vacated piece of property.
Okay. Jim. I noticed that the applicant has said that they will rebuild the sidewalk on 8th Street as a consideration as part of their application. Is that a contractual obligation that they would have to do that? If we would approve this vacation, they would then be obligated to do that in such a time frame?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, as we can set no conditions upon the vacation. So we cannot create any kind of contractual relationship there that says that if the council chooses to vacate, they will then do something or build something or pay something. So whether or not they chose in the future to build frontage improvements, on the parcel is purely up to them and really is not part of the consideration of a vacation itself.
And the fact that they're stating that they would do so is not a contractual obligation on their part.
I would say that it's not binding. No. That they would not have to do that. We can't condition that. I mean, that's just saying that they may do this.
Other questions before I open the public hearing? Thank you, Les. I will now open up the public hearing. I will ask the applicant to come up and explain to us what exactly it is he's trying to do, or she is trying to do. Please state your name, sir, and your address.
Good evening, Mayor and council, staff. My name is Sean Heffley. I'm here on behalf of the property owner, Nathaniel Ely, requesting this vacation of right-of-way. Maybe a quick background. I am from Sandpoint. I moved here in 2013 to attend the University of Idaho School of Law. I'm in my last semester. Prior to this, I spent 15 years in construction and development in Sandpoint. Worked closely with the city staff, the engineers, the planners on a number of subdivisions and issues just like this. So I look forward to doing that here. I call Moscow my home now, and I think that this is a great community, and I'd like to see it continue in the direction that it seems to be headed. With that said, I'd like to add some clarifications maybe on some of the comments that were made. First of all, going to Councilman Boland's question regarding our statements within the letter that we submitted to you. But what we are saying is that by favorable consideration of this request for vacation of right-of-way, it will open up design options that are presently not available to us. Those design options will trigger the requirements set forth already in your city code that will force the project to upgrade the streets and the sidewalks. Without the vacation, our design options are constricted to a point where the economic viability of the higher density housing is less attractive. And there's a number of things we could discuss regarding why that's the case, but that is the case for the options that we're pursuing. So we're not saying that we would, if you give us this, we'll do that. We're saying that the vacation of the right-of-way allows for design opportunities that are not presently available. Those design opportunities trigger the requirements. And so by favorable consideration, those requirements would be done and the streets would be improved. I hope that clarifies things a little bit. I also wanted to comment to Councilman Steed, appreciating your question regarding the potential for future utility providers to be limited to that 10 feet, that would be given over to Mr. Ely. We would still have, as a city, 70 feet of right-of-way. The current city standards for any new streets is 60 feet. And we have determined within our design standards that 60 feet is sufficient for utility providers to engage in the services that they need. We have more than enough room, even with the vacation, to allow for future use to go through underground. And so I think that should be just noted. And another thing that maybe wasn't emphasized quite as much as it should be, if you were able to go out to the site and look, the slope that we're talking about is actually quite steep. I mean, it's over a 2-to-1. And any potential use that the city may look out towards the future would be really difficult to develop in that area because it would require a sizable engineered retaining wall in order to make use of that space, especially if there's now single-family homes on the setbacks. So that's something to keep in mind. This isn't just flat ground where you can just go in and you know, put your utilities in or your benches in or those kinds of things. It's very steep terrain. So those are just some clarifications. One further clarification too, because I think this was something that was mentioned. Avista will retain all the rights that it currently has. And if there is a issue with proximity in terms of the location of the current gas line relative to the edge of our building envelope, which I don't want to butcher your name, so I'm just going to say Councilman Art Betke. Councilman Betke brought up. At our expense, Avista would be, in my experience as a developer, and I've done this many times, at our expense, if we needed to move that line a few feet within that 10-feet location, as long as we were the ones paying the bill, then Avista usually is amenable to those kinds of things. So I think that was the questions that I saw as I was listening to the comments. I also wanted to say that through this process, I had the opportunity in Sandpoint to work with an exceptional engineer and citizen, Cody Van Dyke, and I'm pleased to say that my working relationship so far with Les, despite his standard blueprint of denial of this request, has been nothing but positive. He's a great engineer and has a good head on his shoulders. So I did not I anticipated fully that he would recommend denial, and so just wanted to say that's no big deal, Les.
Hang on a second, Walter, you get your chance.
So going to really what I think the crux of your decision comes to, which is the public interest. Mosco's adopted a comprehensive plan, and inside that comprehensive plan, it stated a number of goals that the favorable consideration of this right-of-way vacation will help further the furtherance of those goals. One is that in Chapter 2, you mentioned that you want to provide a mix of housing and to increase the economic and lifestyle mix throughout the community. And again, this vacation allows for design concepts that would create a higher density use, which, of course, in another area within your comprehensive plan, you note that by increasing those densities, you lowered the land cost per unit. And that's exactly what we would be able to do if we were able to push the edge of that building envelope forward into the H Street corridor, still again 13 feet off of what would be the new property line. So still outside the edge of our architectural projections would still be 3 feet to the south of what would be the current southerly boundary of the right-of-way. So we would still be outside of that. From an aesthetic point of view, we would really not be impacting that 20 feet whatsoever, other than cleaning up the shrubs that have kind of been overgrown and just creating a more usable space for the potential residents there. It mentions in your comp plan in Chapter 2.56 that you want to, that you agree that creating off-site parking and alleyway parking helps push the residents closer to the street, creating a more interactive community. The design concept that we're looking at again, upon favorable consideration, would allow for underground parking, which would then allow us to push those building envelopes closer to the street, creating a more integrated and interactive community, which is, again, a stated goal within your comprehensive plan. Chapter 2.2 recognizes that housing demands have a draw for owner occupancy, or rather non-transient housing. The housing concept that we are looking at, again, upon favorable consideration, would be fee simple ownership housing, non-transient. So owner occupancy, that's what we would be after. And as opposed to, and there's nothing wrong with rentals, and I understand the rental market here in Moscow is a necessity. But what we're trying to do, and what we think the feel of the neighborhood is requiring and to integrate into the neighborhood, is create a development that would encourage owner occupancy, again, consistent with your comprehensive plan. And I think that any time that you have a development in front of you that increases the likelihood of meeting the objectives of the comp plan that the city council has adopted, that you are creating a significant public benefit. And so the public benefit is fostering development that is in alignment with your comprehensive plan. And by favorable consideration of this request, that's exactly what you're doing, and that is a public benefit. Further, we go back to Councilman Boland's noting on the request that the streets would be improved, again, because we would be able to do the design as we have, that we're hopefully going to be able to achieve if we have, the council's affirmative vote on this. So if there's any other questions that you have for me.
Walter had a question, I think. Do you have?
Just a clarification. My questioning about future utilities had to do with would they be able to go in that vacated 10-foot space, not that they would be required to.
Right.
I think the way you stated it a moment ago inferred that I was saying they would have to go there. That wasn't my intent.
Understood. Thank you.
Other questions for the applicant before we move on?
I got one.
Art?
One more. I don't mean to jump the gun on design and things like that, but the reason for the city wanting to push housing closer to the streets is to promote interaction through that, and that doesn't mean a big blank wall with 3 bathroom windows on it facing the street.
Sure.
So this gets into something sketching completely outside of what we need to discuss, but your discussion of density is a good one, but it's got to be the right kind of density and not one that detracts from the existing neighborhood with all of its little Craftsman-y style houses along that stretch.
Understood. And I think the best answer for that, without getting outside the scope of this particular request, is that Mr. Ely and his company, Ely Construction, is committed to providing high-quality, sustainably built housing that the residents can be proud of and that the community as a whole can be proud of. And so I think that, the answer to that kind of soft question, because we don't have the ability to discuss it in particulars here, is that, he's committed to well-planned, civic-minded development. And that whatever ends up on those parcels will meet that standard. Now, whether or not it's the density that we're hoping to achieve, and whether or not it is consistent with the stated goals of the comprehensive plan, is really based upon this request. But either way, what's going to be constructed will be of high quality and sustainably built. And again, that's something the community will be proud to see.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Heffley. And I'll ask for anybody else that would like to come up and in favor, please come up and state your name. If you're in favor, come right up here to the podium, sir, and tell us who you are.